Assalamu alaikum. Our story today is Mansa Musa. It's written by Kefra Burns and it's illustrated by two of my most favorite illustrators, Leo and Diane Dillon. On the back, Dr. Maya Angelou says, "This gorgeous book is for those who know and for those who don't know." It's an exquisite story, and these delightful illustrations form an adult book for children and a children's book for adults. Mansa Musa. In the years after the death of the great king Sundiata, the glory that had once surrounded the kingdom of Mali began to fade. But the empire still extended many weeks from the capital, Niani, to where the shea butter trees grew no longer. And the Malinka were still a proud and noble people, blessed with abundance and beauty. In the village of Kangaba, as in villages throughout Mali, and I need to show you this picture, nearly all the women wore gold beads braided into their hair, and great earrings of gold hung from their ears. The rain always came in the rainy season, and the granaries were filled with millet, rice, and yams. Like the Fulani and the Bela herdsmen from the north, the Malinka villagers raised cattle, and the forest gave them game to hunt. A stone's throw from Kabakangana and the Sankrani River provided fish to eat and fresh water, which the young people carried in water jars and large clay pots from the river to the communal kitchens. And the village was rich in laughter and love, and in music, dance, and crafts as well. It was a source of great pride to the whole village to be admired by outsiders. If a stranger appeared in their midst, they put on a festival display of music and dance and lavish gifts upon the visitor so that he might later boast of Mali's greatness in his travels. And besides, a number of the elders were members of the Keita clan that, according to tradition, was descended from a wanderer from the east. One never knew if such a stranger might not be the spirit of a returning ancestor. Kankan Musa had just returned from drawing water from the river when a stranger appeared in the small village of Kabakanga. Curiously, no one had seen the man approach, but suddenly there he was. The stranger's robes were the color of a clear blue sky, like this one. A turban encircled his head like a white cloud, and his face was veiled so that only the dark slits of his eyes were visible. Kankan wondered if this mysterious visitor might be one of the blue men of the desert. The blue men were said to be fierce nomads who carried long curved knives, who kept strangely silent in the company of others, and whose skin was the color of indigo. As the village elders hurried to welcome the stranger, Kankan remembered the dream he had had the night before, a dream in which sorcerers whose faces were hidden had made Kankan's village disappear. Had made the village disappear, leaving him alone in the world. Water sloshed from the mouth of Kankan's jar and darkened the red earth as he set it down. The stranger turned his eyes towards Kankan and seemed for the moment not to hear the talk of the village elders who had gathered around him. And then he turned back to the elders and said, "I have come far seeking Mali, and I have found great wealth here. But I must tell your king that great wealth that the world has not seen is worthless. Great wealth is worthless to your children's children than a rumor of water to a people dying of thirst." Let's read this again. "I must tell your king that great wealth that the world has not seen is worth less to your children's children than a rumor of water to a people dying of thirst." The elders wondered silently about the stranger who presumed to lecture the king of Mali, but they were much too polite to say anything that might make a guest feel less than welcome. "You will have to go to Niani, the capital city, to speak with the Mansa, that is, the king of Mali," said Musawira with a smile that seemed to mask a secret. But the stranger showed no interest in Niani. "The king has heard me," he said. Later, around the flickering light of the evening fire, Kankan and his older brother Abu Bakari sat with the other young men of their age group among the elders of the village as they sang songs and they told stories for the entertainment of their guest. Bala Diallo, the master drummer, played the balafon while Kalabi Dauman, the senior griot, recited the epic tale of Sundiata, the crippled child who grew to become a great Simban, warrior and founder of the empire. Mamadou Kiata, the village soothsayer, kept his own counsel, offering that it is the wandering dog that finds the old bone. It is the wandering dog that finds the old bone. This he said to Kankan, who was sitting beside him, though he obviously intended it for the hearing of all who were present. There was a brief, awkward silence as everyone wondered what he had meant. And then Musa really reminded them that just that morning, Figate had run off with a stray dog after catching it sniffling around the bones that he used to conjure the ancestors. Everyone laughed except the stranger and the old soothsayer. The young women of the village brought out milk, they brought out sweetmeats, and they brought kola nuts for the visitor. Kola nuts especially were considered a luxury among the desert people, who prized them not only for their refreshment, but because the embrace of the twins, the two interlocking kernels of the nut that made him a token of friendship. The stranger loosened his veil, revealing a face so black that it was almost blue. He told them his name was Tariq al-Aya, that he was a member of the Tuareg tribe from the north. He told strange tales of the great sea to the west, where the world begins and ends, and of his travels across the vast desert to the north and the east. It seemed to Kankan that the Tuareg spoke directly to him as he told of a sand of sea whose waving dunes rise and fall as far as the eye can see, where the billowing dust hangs on the hot wind, blotting out the horizon during the day, where it becomes so cold at night that water turns to diamonds, only to become water again when the sun rises, and where terrible sandstorms can eat the flesh off a man's bones and etch the bones to slivers. He told of the mischievous mysterious jinn, the genies who cause travelers to see mirage, like green oases full of date palms, flowers, and flowing water, where, in reality, there is only more sand. Jinns can put you to sleep, they can show you miracles, and they can even transport you through the air. The desert holds many mysteries, he said. It is a place where many are lost, but it is also a place where a few truly find themselves. So let's continue. Remember what he said? He said the desert. The desert is a place where many are lost, but it is also a place where a few truly find themselves. And beyond the desert, there are worlds where great nations like Alchemia raise temples to rival the mountains, and wise men go to study and learn. There too is Mecca, where all roads converge. Mecca, where all roads converge. Kankan knew that was the sacred city of Islam. Like many in Kankaba, Kankan's family had converted to Islam, but at the same time, they had not given up their traditional religious practices or their belief in the ancestors. And no one from the village had ever been to Mecca. Beyond the desert, the stranger added, few take any notice of the Malinka of Mali. Kankan bristled at this. He wanted to say that Mali would be great again, and he wanted to tell Abu Bakari's dream of carrying its fame to the worlds beyond the Western Sea. But it was not Kankan's place to speak. He was young yet, only 14, and it had been less than a year since he was initiated into the company of the adult men of the village. If he were a Sinman, a master hunter who could communicate with the spirits of the forest and the bush, he would speak and everyone would listen. But he had not yet hunted his first lion, and for the present, he had to sit quietly and listen while the others spoke. Suddenly the night was shattered by loud cries in an unfamiliar tongue rushing in from the darkness. Men on foot and men on horses seemed to be everywhere, filling the village with dust and blood and screams. Slave raiders! Kankan and Abu Bakari ran for their spears, But before they reached their weapons, someone threw a raffia sack over Kankan, and he was swallowed up in darkness. Above the noises of the melee, he heard his mother and brother calling, "Kankan, Kankan!" But there was nothing he could do, as he was thrown over a horse and he was carried away. Their voices faded along with the sounds of the chaos that filled the village. Hours passed. Kankan, angry and ashamed to find himself captured and he was being carried off like a child, saw nothing, and he heard only the sound of the horse's hooves. He vowed to remain alert and to seize the first opportunity to escape. The horses slowed to a walk and Kankan listened intently. Perhaps, he thought, perhaps the slave raiders would stop to rest and he would have a chance. But they kept moving at this slower pace for many more hours. And eventually, Kankan drifted into sleep, exhausted. As Kankan awakened, he knew that something was different. But at first he could not figure out just what it was. He rubbed the sleep from his eyes and he found himself looking at a strange landscape. It was not the millet or the rice or the yam fields of Gaba. It was not the pasture land where the herdsmen grazed their cattle. It was not the forest. It was nothing. The world seemed to have disappeared. And then Kankan remembered the raid on his village. He turned around and he saw a short distance away a camp of 4 camel hair tents. And among those tents he saw camels and horses and men. Blue men, probably the Tuareg, in flowing robes, with turbans and veils that left only their eyes visible. The silver handles of their swords glinted in the harsh sunlight from beneath layered folds of fabric. Remembering his plan to escape, Kankan rose to his feet, but he took only a few steps. He was weak, his legs were wobbly, and as he looked around, he realized there was no place to run, no tree, no rock to hide, only mile after mile of shifting sand dunes stretching to the horizon in every direction. Heat rising from the sand set the air aquiver. Kankan looked back. The Tuareg nomads were watching him, but they made no move toward him. It took all of Kankan's strength just to keep standing. So for the present, he sat back down. One of the blue men gave orders, and a moment later Kankan saw someone approaching who looked familiar. It was Yaya. Yaya was one of the boys of Kankan's age group who must have been captured also. Yaya brought him water and something to eat. "Kankan, you have returned," said Yaya. "You were asleep for many days, and the raiders decided only this morning to leave you, that they decided they would leave you to die in the desert." Kankan gradually regained his strength, and he was not left to die. Instead, he remained a captive of the desert band. Together with the others from his village, he was bound to his captors, not by rope, but by his need for food and water. The caravan moved in the early morning hours before the sun rose, and the caravan rested during the day when the sun was high in the sky. And then, in late afternoon, they would set off again and continue for some time into the night, always moving to the northeast. After several days, they came to an oasis where there were date palms and henna trees, houses that were square or rectangular, unlike the round houses of Kankan's village, and a market where traders bartered glass and beads, spices, brocade, slaves, and salt for gold.
Can you tell us the rest of the story?
Yes, I'm finding it a fascinating story. As they entered the market, Kankan looked back toward the desert from which they had taken refuge, and he saw another band of blue men on camelback, their voluminous robes billowing, their faces veiled to protect them from the biting winds and the blowing sands. As the men drew closer, there appeared to be only 3 of them, and then 2, and then 1. Their number had been a mirage, a trick of the desert. The lone traveler dismounted, and he approached the captives. He looked over the group, and then he stopped in front of Kankan, staring at him with hard eyes. Silver talismans to ward off the evil eye encircled his turban, and they glinted in the afternoon sunlight. He turned and walked away, but he returned moments later with one of the slave traders. The lone traveler pointed to Kankan as the men spoke in their strange language. Gold changed hands, and then the slaver grasped Kankan roughly by the arm and he pulled him up from where he was sitting on the ground. Speaking now in Kankan's own language, the lone nomad said, "Come," and turned to walk away. At first, Kankan just stood there, but the stranger turned again and he repeated, "Come." For now, Kankan thought, there was nothing to do but follow. The nomad mounted his kneeling camel, and the beast lurched to its feet. Looking down at Kankan and pointing to another animal, the veiled blue-black stranger said, "Take that camel and come." Kankan took the reins of the beast and he led it out of the oasis and into the open desert, following his uncertain fate. Sadness weighed heavily on his heart. I am not just a captive, but a slave, he thought. I may never see my village again. Late that night they made camp. When Kankan had traveled with the slave raiders, he and the other captives had slept in the open. He never saw the inside of the Tuaregs' tents. But this nomad was different. "Come," he said. Cautiously, warily, Kankan entered the camel hair tent. Inside he found surprising comforts. The ceilings and the walls of the tent were hung with silk tapestries, and rich rugs carpeted the floors. Light flickered from 3 oil wicks, and incense filled the air. Kankan also spied a curved knife. While the desert wanderer was occupied with laying some food of some sort, he turned his back to Kankan. Kankan picked up the knife, and he removed it from its sheath. If he moved quickly, he could take the man by surprise. His whole body trembled with readiness, yet something held him back. While his back was still to Kankan, the wanderer poured tea, and he said casually, "It is a difficult thing when one is young, knowing when to act and when to watch and wait." Kankan froze where he stood, unable to move a muscle. Had the man seen him pick up the knife? And if so, why had he not turned to defend himself? Had the man seen him? If so, why had he not turned around to defend himself? What one spills with fearful stabs at phantoms in the dark, said the nomad, may turn out to be water from one's own water skin when the harsh light of day returns to the desert. The Tuareg's words were a warning, and Kankan knew that he was right. Even with camels and water, Kankan would never survive alone in this alien world. Kankan slipped the blade back into its sheath and he laid it down. A moment later, when the nomad turned toward him with an offering of food, it was pounded millet, served with milk and honey in a half calabash, dried meat, tea, and kola nuts. And looking now into Kankan's eyes, the Tuareg counseled, "In the desert, death is always near at hand. As familiar as a frequent guest for whom one has developed deep respect. It is even at times a friend." He paused and then he added, "There is no greater freedom than freedom from the fear of death." There is no greater freedom than freedom from the fear of death. There was something familiar about this man, something that lay just beyond Kankan's recognition. "Sit and eat," the man commanded. The food looked good and Kankan was very hungry, so for the present, he put aside his suspicions and he ate. When Kankan looked up again, he saw the Tuareg had loosed his veil, and to Kankan's amazement, he was the same man who had visited Kabakangaga the night the slave raiders came. Tariq al-Aya. "You!" Kankan jumped to his feet. "My village offered you hospitality. And so I offer you the same now, replied Tariq, his voice calm. You betrayed us to the slave raiders, Kankan said. I am not one of them, the nomad told him. The words had the ring of truth, but Kankan was reluctant to believe him. But you bought me to be your slave, Kankan said accusingly. You are your own slave, Tariq replied. I was a free member of the Kaita clan of the Malinka of Mali, Kankan replied with pride and indignation. Tariq said, you don't know who you are. Kankan felt a familiar sting. He and his brothers, Abu Bakari and little Suleiman, never knew their father. Whenever the other boys in his village disagreed with Kankan or wanted to tease him, they would say, you don't even know who you are. Kankan's mother, Koroni, said his father had been a great warrior. More than this, she would not say. When Kankan begged to know more, she would whisper in his ear, to know your father, you must first give birth to yourself. But Kankan didn't understand how this was possible. Koroni told him, Yerewolo, giving birth to oneself, involved great magic. I bought your freedom with gold, Tariq was saying. I offered you a camel, but you chose to walk like a slave. Already you think like a slave. Here in the desert where death is near, I offer you shelter, food and water, life. And you think only of slitting my throat when my back is turned. You claim to be a man, but you have not yet mastered the beast within you. Kankan found himself at a loss for what to do or say. Sit, said Tariq. Sit and eat. The journey is long, but it can only be made one step at a time. Kankan sat down but did not finish his meal right away. Where are you going? He asked. Where I am going is of less importance to you than where I have been, Tariq said. The question is, where are you going? I want to return home to my village, Kankan said. Tariq shook his head slowly. You have only just begun your journey. It would not be good to turn back now. You must go on. Where? Kankan asked. I cannot tell you where. Only Allah knows. But if you will be guided by him, then I will journey with you a while. There is much that I can share with you that may help you to discover the way, the path. You have only begun to be tested. Take the knife, the nomad said. It is yours. You must handle it with great care. That knife is tipped with a deadly poison that kills as swiftly as a hand smothers the flame of a lighted wick. With that, Tariq snuffed out the tiny lights of the oil wick candles. 1, 2, 3. Suddenly, it was so utterly dark, so still, that Kankan could have been alone in the tent, alone in the desert, alone in the world. For what seemed a long time, he could not even hear the sound of Tariq's breathing. It was as if the nomad had just disappeared. And then he heard him stir, and he knew from the muffled sounds that he had laid down and that he was asleep. Kankan lay down too. At first he only stared into the darkness. He was still holding a kola nut tight in his hand, as if clinging to the memories of his life in Kangaba. He heard his mother Koroni whispering, Yarowolo. He thought of Abu Bakari venturing into the haunted woods on a dare from the other boys of the village and talking about how one day he would set sail on the great western sea. And he thought of little Suleiman, who followed Kankan everywhere at home. Soon Kankan too was asleep, and that night he dreamt about cool water dipped from a deep well. Kankan had had this dream before, and always when he drank from the well, he was transformed into a mighty lion. Time soon blurred for Mansa Musa. The days ran into weeks, and the weeks into months. Above them, the sun roared like a lion. In the heat-addled air of the desert, crescent dunes rolled endlessly toward every horizon, interrupted only by barren plateaus of sandstone or volcanic rock and dry riverbeds. Like the dunes, Kankan and Tariq al-Aya wandered from oasis to oasis, sometimes in small caravans with other desert dwellers, and sometimes alone. There were long stretches where there was no water at all, and when the water skins were empty. If they had arrived at an oasis to find it dried up, they would surely have perished. Tariq al-Aya talked of the ways of the nomadic Tuareg, Wadabe, and Bedouin. He told of the origins of the Dogon who built their villages on the sheer faces of cliffs, of Tagaza, a city built entirely of salt, and another, Baladu, built entirely of copper. He recounted tales of kings and heroes who had journeyed far, and with courage, and with the help of magical jinns, and that had subdued fantastic monsters and discovered vast hidden treasures. Sometimes he would sing Tuareg songs about green forests and cool shade and bubbling streams, things that they were never found in the desert, but which the soul desires. And sometimes they rode in silence, a silence so vast, Kankan thought he could hear in it the voice of God. In almost everything, the stories, the songs, and even the silences, there were valuable lessons. Tariq showed Kankan many things: how to ride camels, how to tie his turban, and his veil against the face against the desert and the eyes of strangers, where to hide his knife in the folds of his robes, the robes which the blue man called gandoma. "Where is your knife?" Tariq had once asked him. Kankan reached to draw the blade from its sheath, when suddenly he was blinded by a blur of whirling blue and white cloth. Your knife hand is bleeding," Tariq told the stunned Kankan. Kankan looked and he saw 2 thin lines of blood welling up from the back of his right hand. It had happened so quickly that Pain did not even know where to look for the wound. Kankan was amazed. "Teach me to wield the knife with such skill," Kankan demanded. "One lesson at a time," Tariq responded. "First, never draw your knife until you are ready to use it. The knife that no man ever sees is the deadliest and the best defense." Then he added, "Pray to Allah that you will never need it." Kankan learned to survive. He learned that to survive, the desert dweller must constantly be alert to 1,000 different signs telling him where he is, where the others are, where water and food may be found. The circling of a bird, the tracks of a dung beetle, the ripples of a dune, a billowing of tan dust in the distance, shadows, even the desert stillness can tell you things that may preserve your life. Only after your awareness of such details becomes second nature, instructed Tariq, only then will the siyahat, the rhythm of movement, begin to dissolve the distractions and the attachments of the world and allow you to lose yourself in the vast horizon and the dazzling sky of the great desert. Then, Kankan Musa, then you may truly find yourself. When they had traveled together for nearly 5 years, Kankan and Tariq came to the Agadez oasis at the foot of the mysterious Are Mountains. It was much cooler in the mountains, and life took refuge there. There were birds of prey, hyena, and desert fox. But the mountains were also haunted. Strange rock paintings of fantastic dreamlike creatures appeared along the path every now and then, like warnings that Kankan couldn't understand. He had the eerie feeling that someone or something was watching them, following them. Jinns. Jinns, Tariq said softly, and they continued to ride in the silence. When Tariq and Kankan came upon a cool spring among the fig and wild olive trees, they filled their water skins and they decided to make camp. Just as they were about to unload their camels, Kankan noticed a rock painting in the clearing. This was strange indeed, because neither he nor Tariq had seen it when they first arrived. The painting was of a great golden snake, a snake that rose up out of the black well and traveled over the waves of the sea toward a rising sun. A mighty lion rode on the snake's head, and many men rode on its back, while many people of many nations watched in amazement. Kankan knew that he had seen this scene in his dreams. He had seen it before in his dreams, but he had never understood its meaning. He and Tariq were so mesmerized by the painting that they didn't notice the jinn rising from the spring like a faint mist. By the time Kankan turned around, the mist had settled on the bank of the stream, taking the form of a lion. Kankan stood frozen. Slowly, he reached over to warn Tariq, whose back was turned and who seemed still to be looking at the painted rock. But Tariq was not looking at anything. He was sound asleep on his feet. Kankan tried to awaken him, but the nomad would not stir. "There is no use trying to awaken him," the lion said. "He cannot hear you." It was true. Kankan was alone with the beast, alone with his fear, and both eyed him now with the cold stare of a predator stalking its prey. Something he had once heard from the hunters of his village now kept his feet rooted where he stood. Cats kill with a bite to the back of the neck. Their victims are always fleeing. Kankan knew that he could stand, and he could be a hunter, or he could flee and become the game. Cats kill with a bite to the back of the neck, and their victims are always fleeing. Kankan stood tall. "What manner of lion are you that you speak to men?" "I am Sinbon, the mighty hunter who steals upon mighty hunters, a king of beasts and a king of men. What manner of men are you that you heed the speech of beasts?" The lion jinn responded. The lion was speaking in riddles. Kankan knew that he should take great care with his words now, lest he give the wrong response and that a lion should devour him. He began to feel the panic that Tariq had so often warned of creeping up on him. It was the same terror that he had felt one night in the Sahel when, gathering twigs for a fire, he had met the glowing eyes of a hyena. It was only after the hyena had backed off into the night that Kankan turned to find Tariq, dark and imposing, behind him. Tariq's words came back to him now. Neither hyena nor lion nor dragonfish, but fear. Fear is the beast that devours a man. Kankan managed to control this beastly fear, and in so doing found his answer to the lion jinn. "I am master of the beast," Kankan answered boldly, "and one who hunts the lion. In coming face to face with the lion, you may discover your own true identity," the lion jinn said. "But be forewarned, if you are not truly master of the beast will devour you." The lion then roared. He roared a terrible roar, and he sprang toward Kankan. Kankan's knife flashed from his robes, but in midair, the mighty lion dissolved back into a mist that fell gently away. "The lion wears the trousers of the king," Tariq said. He was awake again and studying the rock painting, unaware that anything unusual had happened or that he had been asleep. Kankan looked at the rock painting, and he saw that the lion was indeed wearing the royal trousers of the king of Mali. He would have to think about what that meant later, but for now, he thought only of leaving this place. Kankan mounted his camel. "Come," he said to Tariq. The nomad hesitated, but there was no mistaking the quiet authority in the boy's command. Tariq mounted his camel, and together they continued their trek through the Air Mountains. They didn't see the lion again, but they heard the roaring echoing through the rock canyons until they reached the desert dunes a few days later. Once again, a vast sea of sand stretched out before them, reaching to the eastern horizon. I must visit these worlds beyond the desert you speak of, Kankan told Tariq. Something the lion had said reminded him that there were things he had yet to see and things he had to discover. We will go to Al-Khamiyah, Tariq said. Tariq and Kankan journeyed another several months in the desert until one morning, as the darkness lifted in the east, Kankan saw 3 perfect mountains rising in the distance, monuments to a civilization that was older than memory. This is truly greatness that time cannot erase, Kankan marveled. All things yield to time, replied Tariq, but time yields to these alone. The great pyramids towered above Al-Khamiyah, which some call Egypt. Here the sands of the Sahara meet the waters of the Nile, and the mighty majestic Sphinx, the Lion Man, watches the passing of eons. Here, too, the solitude and the silence of the desert suddenly exploded into a world of commotion and confusing sights and sounds. In the capital city of Al-Kahira, which the Arabs called Dunya, mother of the world, men drove camels through the streets where muddy buffaloes and donkeys pulled carts laden with trade goods. Traders bartered in the shops of the tailors, the bakers, the sandal makers, and the fish and the fruit vendors that lined the maze of alleyways between the sand-colored walls and the brick and the stone houses and mosques. Veiled women with babies on their hips carried water pots on their heads. Little boys shouted from rooftops, and they slung stones at birds. In the crowded, bustling bazaars, beneath the palm trees, the merchants sold everything from aromatic spices to carpets to gold and silk. Musicians and dancers, snake charmers, dogs, beggars, and holy men shared the narrow lanes and the courtyards. And from the minarets, the muezzins wailed, Allahu Akbar. Kankan Musa had never seen such intense activity. In Al-Kahira, he met people from the far corners of the world. Many were black, but there were some of those skins where the color were copper or amber, and some had colors of the color of old ivory. They came from the Mediterranean and beyond, from Greece and Rome, and from farther east of Al-Khamiyah. They were Muslims, they were Christians and Jews. Al-Khamiyah was a land of many prophets, Kankan discovered, and some were shared by Muslims, Christians, and Jews alike. One such prophet, he learned, was known by a name that is the same as Musa. In our tongue, you would be called Kankan Moses, said one old woman of the Nile. That means unfathered son of a princess. Kankan felt the familiar sting, the unfulfilled longing to know his own father. But he listened, and the old woman continued. It also means drawn out of water, as in the ancient times the infant Moses was found floating in a basket in the Nile. Moses didn't know his father, but in time he learned the truth about his own identity, and later he led his people into the desert and onto the path, the siyahat of self-discovery. It is the same everywhere, Kankan remarked, that night as he and Tariq supped on lamb and dates and sun-raised bread in a small inn. Whether man, woman, or nation, we are born into the world, and once born, we must set out on a journey. We all must set out on a journey to discover just who we are and where we have come from. A week after Kankan and Tariq arrived in Al-Kahira, many thousands gathered at the Gate of Conquests, one of 60 gates to the city. 60 gates. To celebrate the return of the annual pilgrim caravan from Mecca, the birthplace of the Prophet Muhammad. Peace be unto you, the returning pilgrims were greeted, and unto you be peace, they replied. May Allah the Beneficent, the Compassionate, the Merciful, bless and preserve you. The travelers told of the Hajj, that is, the pilgrimage, that they had made with the Bedouins, the Persians, Indians, Turks, Arabs, and Syrians, crossing the desert wastes until reaching the gardens and the oases and the orchards of a paradise that they claimed was the navel of the world, where the deep green of the lime, the pomegranate, and the date trees provided respite and refreshment. and a bubbling stream of clear, sweet water filled the air with delicious melodies. They talked of miracles, of wells that never ran dry, and they told how the beating wings of angels brought a cooling breeze around the sacred shrine of the Kaaba. But beyond the experience of the Hajj, Kankan understood that there was an exchange of ideas and of cultures taking place here, with the peoples of the greatest nations of the world all taking part. And he was dismayed to discover that, as Tariq had said so long ago, few from other lands had heard of the great Sundayata, or that the empire that he had built called Mali. These many tribes have warred against each other. They have lived together and they have traded goods for many generations. They have a common history. Sundayata's conquests are nothing to them. What cause have they to know of Mali? Kankan didn't have the answer to that, but he vowed solemnly that in Al-Khamiyah and in Mecca, where the mighty nations meet and their monuments reach to the skies and defy the passage of time, the legends and deeds of Mali too would one day be recorded. But there was much to think about and digest. He had learned a great deal in his 6 years of wandering with Tariq, and now, after months in the city, the solitude of the desert beckoned him once again. The desert, where wind-blown sand quickly covers all tracks, and every traveler must find his own way. Kankan stood over the last camel where it lay dying in the burning sand. Tariq and Kankan were nearly 9 months' travel into the desert. Drought had dried up the wells at the Marzafla oasis, and both their water skins were now empty. Tariq walked ahead a few paces, and he was suddenly obscured from Kankan's sight by the dust stirred up by the gust of the hot, dry desert wind. When the dust settled, Tariq was gone. He had vanished. He had vanished as mysteriously as he had appeared at Kaba Kangaba nearly 7 years earlier. His tracks in the sand ended only yards from where Kankan stood. Kankan was alone, utterly alone. As far as he could see, there was nothing but sand and sun. Look around you, Kankan said to himself, remembering Tariq's words. As far as you can see freedom. But freedom at that moment felt like pain, like emptiness, like the next gust of wind that would dispel his very being as easily as it would the smoke from a quenched candle. Kankan began walking. The Siyaya hut, the rhythm of walking, will clear your mind and it will cleanse your spirit here. He heard Tariq saying that. And then he thought that he heard other voices in the wind telling him of water, of villages and empires just ahead of him. Jinns, Kankan thought, I'll not be fooled by your tricks. He continued walking west until his strength began to give out. He stopped to rest his legs for a moment, and as he stood staring at the desert before him, the wind began to blow again, moving the desert sands out like the tides of a vast ocean. Little by little, the winds uncovered the ruins of a walled city that must have been buried there for centuries. Kankan found himself standing on the roof of one of the buildings. He descended the stone steps that ran down a side wall to an empty courtyard. There he found a gate to the city that might easily have been the capital of a mighty empire. Its name, its kings, its people, its noble deeds now lost forever in the sands of time. Kankan was drawn to a door, through which he entered to a great hall where the air was cool and damp. In the center of this ancient hall stood a well. The well was as big around as the houses in Kabakanga and nearly filled to the rim with water. Kankan drank the cool, life-saving water from the well, and he filled his water skin. Then, as he peered into the well, the light dancing on the surface of the water gradually formed an image. The image was faint at first, but as it became clearer and stronger, Kankan recognized the great golden snake of his dreams. And there it was again, just as he had seen it in the rock painting in the Are Mountains. Only now it was clear that the snake was not traveling over waves of water, but over waving dunes of the desert. The lion in the king's trousers rode in the great snake's head, with many men behind him. The serpent turned and seemed to move over the desert sands toward Kankan, and as it drew closer, the lion's face was transformed. It became human and strangely familiar. "I am Simban," the image in the well said, "the mighty hunter who steals upon mighty hunters, a king of beasts and a king of men. I am Sundiata." As the image faded from the well, Kankan realized that what he was looking at was his own face reflected in the water. He had not recognized himself at first. Months had passed since he had last seen his own reflection, and it seemed more like ages. There was no mistaking the distinctive features of the noble Kaita clan. He was of the Malinka, a child of Mali, and heir to the glory of Sundiata. He had known all along, of course, but the knowing was somehow now different. A deeper knowing. At last, Mansa Musa could say to himself, "I know who I am." A deep, beastly growl caused Kankan to look up from the well. Only a few feet away stood a lion. Was this another jinn who had come to test him or maybe trick him? This lion had not appeared out of a mist, nor was it talking. This lion looked very real. It watched him with a hunter's eyes. But Kankan was beyond the fear of death. "I am king of the beast," Kankan said. "You will not devour me." The lion turned and left the hall. Silently, stealthily, Kankan pursued it through the maze of empty, ancient streets. He was a hunter, a Simban. Before long, he found himself on the edge of the desert. The winds blew up a dust storm, and in minutes the ancient city disappeared beneath the sands without a trace. Had it been just a mirage, a trick played on him by the desert jinn? Lion tracks in the sand stretched away toward the west. Kankan felt his water skin. It was full. He veiled his face against the wind. The sand and the sun followed, and he followed the trail over the dunes. He walked nearly 100 miles alone in the desert. The wind never covered the lion's tracks, and no matter how much Kankan drank from his water skin, it remained full. The landscape changed from sand to grassy savanna as Kankan followed the lion's trail to Timbuktu at the Great Bend in the Niger River. When he saw the shea butter trees of Mali, he was sure the lion's tracks would lead him home. But then Kankan came to a crossroads, and while he knew Kabakanga was straight ahead, the lion's trail veered to the left, toward Niani, to Mali's capital. Whatever is at the end of this trail, whether lion or jinn or something else, Kankan thought, I must pursue it. In Niani, the trail suddenly ran out. The lion's tracks were lost in the footprints of people. A celebration was taking place. Drummers and dancers filled the streets, and everyone was singing songs in praise of the Mansa, the king of Mali. At first, no one seemed to notice Kankan. He was dressed in the robes of the desert nomads of the north. Except for his eyes, his face was hidden by his turban and veil. He was surprised to see many there whom he had known from Kabakanga. Though none recognized him now, Musa Wiri and the other village elders greeted him warmly, and they asked him if he had come to pay tribute to the new king of Mali. Kankan's heart overflowed with joy. He wanted to reveal himself and inquire after his brothers and his mother, but he waited. Instinctively, he knew that the hunt was not over, and above all, the hunter must have patience. In the bold manner of a Tuareg who had been his teacher, he said, "A king worthy of tribute is also worthy of trial." The elders of Kabakanga could hardly believe their ears. For many months, Kankan added, I have hunted a certain king, and the trail has led me to this place. When I can look into his eyes, I will know whether he is truly king. Who is the stranger who comes among us to challenge our king? The Malinka elders asked themselves. I am he. I am he who has faced the lion, and I have stood before a mighty sun. I have seen the name of greatness written in the man-made mountains of Kamia. I have seen eternity in a vast expanse of open desert. I am he who has seen the fate of Mali written in the ruins of empires, now buried and forgotten in time. The elders sent word of this stranger to the new king. The Mansa of Mali says, bring the stranger forward, the messenger told them when he returned. The Mansa sat on a throne of ebony, overarched by large ivory elephant tusks that rose up on each side. He was wearing wide trousers made out of a cloth that only he was permitted to wear. A young boy at his left held a silk umbrella over him to shade the king from the hot sun. His officers sat around him armed with sabers, lances, quivers, and bows and arrows of gold. As Kankan approached the throne, he recognized the Mansa. He was Kankan's own brother, Abu Bakari, and to one side stood their mother, Koroni, still strong as a balanza tree, rooted and unmovable. Suleiman, now tall and handsome, sat with the council of men. Abu Bakari waved his fly whisk to signal the drummers and the dancers to cease their merrymaking. Kankan, a veiled stranger, stood before Abu Bakari. Welcome, Tureg. I am told you come to warn the Balinka of times that will turn the happiness you see all around you here to sorrow and regret. Tell me, where shall we look for this threat? Mali reigns over the Bilad as-Sudan from the salt mines of Tagaza in the north to as far south as Futa Jalon and the gold mining districts on the fringe of the rainforests. In the east, her dominion extends to where the Shia brother trees no longer grow, and in the west to the gold-rich Tekrur lands, reaching all the way to the Great Sea. One day we will venture beyond that. So tell me, stranger, who threatens Mali? The stranger acknowledged, Mali is indeed great, but she has only begun to give birth to herself. Something in the stranger's voice disturbed Koroni deeply, and when he spoke of Mali giving birth to herself, Yarawolo was the phrase he used. She was filled with a sudden painful longing. There are worlds away, to the north and the east, and perhaps beyond the Great Sea as well, that have never heard of Mali, he continued. When your children's children and their descendants for many generations unborn to say to those in distant lands, I am descended from the Malinka of Mali, will people answer them, where is Mali? When the epic tales of great nations are told, will the glories of Mali be remembered? Or will some of little gold and few victories say that the Malinka went naked in the forests, they ate their grains wild, their meat raw, and were fit only to be slaves? Who then will be able to challenge such evil misstatements and say, we knew Mali in her glory, her kings and heroes, her great beauty, and the legend of her might lives on in our memory. Abu Bakari was not pleased. 7 years ago, a stranger like yourself entered our midst with warnings. He was welcomed by the elders who showed him the hospitality of our village. And that night, bandits from the north also came, and they stole my brother and others from us. Yes, I remember that night, said the stranger. You were among them? Asked the Mansa. Yes, replied the nomad. Tell me then, why should I not have you killed? Will you also kill your brother you lost? The stranger asked. You have my brother? Abu Bakr asked. You have brought Khan Musa? Where is he? Bring him to me, that I may see him with my own eyes. As Abu Bakr spoke, Suleiman stared at the stranger. Khan, he asked. The stranger loosed his veil, and he removed his turban. He was no stranger at all. He was no stranger at all. Koroni screamed, and from all who knew came astonished cries, Khan Musa, son of Abu Bakr, son of Sandiata. Khan bowed to his brother, the king, who then lifted him joyfully up into his arms. Later, Khan sat up late into the night with Abu Bakr, Suleiman, and Koroni. Koroni revealed to Khan that he and his brothers were the grandsons of the great king Sandiata. Their father, Mansa Abu Bakr, had died young before his sons were old enough to know him, killed by Sakura, who had usurped the throne. Koroni had fled to Kabakanga, where the elders of the Keita clan kept Abu Bakr's family and their secrets safe. And then, in the years after Khan disappeared, Sakura was killed and the people of Mali made Abu Bakr king. With the Keita clan once more in power, Mali would be great again. For many years, Khan served as the chief advisor to Abu Bakr. Where his brother had extended Mali's influence by military might, Khan helped to consolidate the empire, ensuring the loyalty of its tribute-paying states through diplomacy and trade. Suleiman, the lover of justice, became a lawgiver, and like his brothers before him, the Mansa of Mali. As the challenges facing Mali became fewer and fewer, Abu Bakr's interest shifted from governing the kingdom to thoughts of realizing a lifelong dream. He commissioned a construction of ships. A massive fleet of ships turned the empire over to his brother Khan, and he set sail on his own voyage of discovery in search of lands beyond the Western Sea. Abu Bakr never returned. The seasons came and went, and the bounty of Mali increased manifold. Khan Musa, now Mansa Musa, expanded the empire to the north and the east, where he gained control of the all-important trading cities of the Sahara, the copper mines of Takeda, and the world-renowned learning centers of Timbuktu and Gao. Mali was said to be 4 months' travel long and 4 months wide, the richest nation in all of Africa. 4 months travel long and 4 months travel wide. Like Abu Bakr, Mansa Musa had not given up the dream of carrying the name of Mali abroad. The time had come, and Mansa Musa made plans to cross the desert once again, this time to make the pilgrimage to Mecca. For the journey, Mansa Musa assembled a caravan of a size that had never been seen before. The train of 60,000 courtiers and servants included the king's personal retinue of 12,000 attendants, all dressed in brocade and Persian silk. 500 others each carried a staff of gold weighing 6 pounds. Behind Mansa Musa walked 80 gold-laden camels. Now take a look here. 80 gold-laden camels, each carrying 300 pounds of gold bars and gold dust. And riding at the head of this golden caravan that snaked its way over the sands was Mansa Musa himself, the Lion of Mali. Word of this dazzling spectacle spread far and wide, and the name of Mali echoed throughout the great empires of the world. Mansa Musa was very generous. He distributed his wealth freely as he traveled. He was making gifts of gold to foreign rulers and courtiers and the poor. Many who might never have made the pilgrimage were invited to join his caravan. Wherever he went, he built mosques, palaces, and universities. And when he returned to Mali 2 years later, he brought back scholars, jurists, architects, and advisors. At At last the whole world knew of Mali and of the great Mansa Musa.